Right now, thousands of riders are realizing the Harley dream isn't what it used to be, and you need to know why. This isn't just about motorcycles, it's about value, identity, and pride. Watch till the end or risk being the only one left in the dark when the truth breaks. The cult of the V-twin. Harley Davidson did not just build motorcycles, it built a faith. For over 100 years, the company's 45-degree V-twin engine became more than steel and pistons. It became a cultural altar. The deep rumble that echoed from its cylinders was not only sound, it was identity. To millions of riders, the V-twin represented freedom, rebellion, and the very spirit of America. Owning one was not a purchase, it was a rite of passage. You were not just buying transportation, you were buying a story of desert highways, leather jackets, and a kind of rugged independence that could not be duplicated. What made this engine so powerful as a symbol was not its technical brilliance, it was its emotional resonance. Hollywood placed it under Marlon Brando and Peter Fonda. Veterans returning from wars found solace in its mechanical thunder. Entire motorcycle clubs were born around the sound alone. That distinctive potato-potato exhaust note became shorthand for power, even though the specifications often lagged behind foreign rivals. The V-twin was never the fastest, never the lightest, never the most efficient. But none of that mattered, because Harley had achieved something rarer than innovation. It had created mythology. For decades, this mythology was enough to paper over any weakness. Customers accepted the quirks, the oil leaks, the quirks of maintenance because what they were really buying was a piece of the American dream. Other manufacturers could brag about speed or reliability. Harley alone sold belonging. But myths, no matter how powerful, eventually collide with reality. The louder the roar of the V-twin, the more it masked problems riders were increasingly forced to face. But behind that roar was a weakness no one wanted to admit. The flaw in the engine. The very thing that made Harley's V-twin beloved, its raw, mechanical character, also hid fundamental flaws. Engineers knew it. Long-distance riders felt it. Yet for years, nobody wanted to speak the truth. The 45-degree V-twin design created an unmistakable sound, but it also created vibration that rattled teeth and bolts alike. Heat radiated off the cylinders like a furnace, baking riders in summer traffic. Efficiency lagged far behind modern engines, leaving Harleys heavy, sluggish, and thirsty for fuel. As the motorcycle world modernized, these shortcomings grew harder to excuse. By the 1990s, Japanese rivals had perfected liquid-cooled inline fours that produced twice the horsepower at half the displacement. European manufacturers engineered V-twins with advanced cooling, smoother delivery, and far better power-to-weight ratios. Harley's engine, still air-cooled and stubbornly traditional, looked less like a marvel and more like an anchor. The same rumble that once meant freedom now meant compromise. Technology moved forward, but Harley did not. Riders noticed that while competitors offered digital dashboards, multiple riding modes, and smoother acceleration, the V-twin clung to its archaic roots. Harley marketed this as authenticity, but for younger riders raised on performance and efficiency, it sounded more like an excuse. The flaws were no longer charming, they were liabilities. Even loyalists, though reluctant to admit it, felt the strain. And then regulators finally noticed. Harley's nightmare began. If you're already shocked by what we've uncovered so far, hit the like button and drop a comment below. Do you think Harley can survive this? I want to hear your take. The emissions time bomb. The turning point came when the myth of tradition collided with the hard wall of regulation. In 2015, Harley Davidson was fined millions of dollars by the Environmental Protection Agency for selling defeat devices that allowed its V-twins to bypass emissions standards. What had long been whispered about, poor compliance, dirty exhaust, was suddenly undeniable. The government had put into writing what engineers had long known. The V-twin was no longer fit for the future. This was not a one-off scandal. It exposed the structural problem Harley could no longer dodge. Emission standards in the United States and Europe were tightening year after year, and air-cooled V-twins could not realistically keep up. To meet these laws, Harley would need to fundamentally redesign its engines, losing much of the character that made them iconic, or risk falling behind competitors who were already compliant. Either option spelled disaster. For decades, Harley sold the V-twin as timeless, but the EPA ruling revealed it was also obsolete. And unlike marketing problems, regulatory problems cannot be spun with glossy brochures. Riders who once shrugged off inefficiency now face the knowledge that their beloved machines were polluting at levels lawmakers could no longer ignore. Harley tried to pay fines, issue updates, and move past the scandal. But the damage was deeper than legal. It was psychological. The aura of invincibility cracked, but Harley's real threat was not Washington. It was competition closing in. If you're still riding, make sure you've got the right gear and accessories. We've linked a full list in the description. Rivals rewrite the rules. While Harley clung to nostalgia, rivals around the world rewrote the motorcycle rulebook. Ducati refined its liquid-cooled L-twin engines into high-revving, efficient machines that could dominate both racetracks and city streets. BMW pushed forward with boxer twins and advanced electronics that redefined reliability and touring comfort. Yamaha and Honda delivered smooth, affordable, and technologically superior inline engines that attracted younger riders in droves. Against these offerings, Harley's V-twin looked like a relic frozen in time. The contrast was glaring. European and Japanese manufacturers were not burdened by tradition in the same way. They could innovate without fear of alienating their core base because their core base demanded performance above all. Harley, on the other hand, was trapped. Every attempt to modernize risked angering purists. Every refusal to modernize made them fall further behind. It was a lose-lose scenario, and rivals took advantage. Riders walked into showrooms and saw side-by-side comparisons. More horsepower, more features, lighter weight, lower emissions, all for less money. Harley still sold on lifestyle, but even that was fading. Younger buyers scrolling through social media saw Ducatis leaning through hairpins, Yamahas wheeling out of corners, and BMWs crossing continents. Harley's marketing looked dated, and the V-twin, once a symbol of rebellion, now symbolized stagnation. Rivals were not just building better motorcycles, they were building a future Harley seemed unwilling or unable to join. But the betrayal that cut deepest did not come from rivals. It came from Harley itself. The Milwaukee-Eight Gamble. When Harley unveiled the Milwaukee-Eight engine in 2017, the announcement came with a promise. This would be the engine that carried the brand into the future. Marketing materials hailed its improved cooling, increased torque, and smoother delivery as proof that Harley was finally listening to both critics and customers. For a moment, the faithful believed. This was the new beginning they had been waiting for. But the reality was far less triumphant. The Milwaukee-Eight was not revolutionary, it was evolutionary. Yes, it reduced some heat issues and delivered a bit more power, but the fundamentals remained the same. It was still a heavy, air-cooled V-twin, struggling under the weight of emission standards and global competition. Riders who expected a true leap forward discovered a machine that felt familiar, maybe too familiar. The roar was still there, but the innovation was not. Dealers found themselves in a difficult position. They could not deny that the Milwaukee-Eight was an improvement, yet they could not oversell it either. Reviews described it as fine, adequate, even necessary, but almost never transformative. In the world of modern motorcycles, adequacy is not enough. Ducati and Yamaha were dazzling riders with new technologies, while Harley was patting itself on the back for finally smoothing out vibrations. The gamble failed. Instead of saving Harley, the Milwaukee-Eight highlighted just how far behind the company had fallen. What should have been a rebirth was at best a bandage. So Harley tried again, with a radical break from tradition. The Revolution. Max Gamble. The Revolution Max engine was supposed to be Harley Davidson's bold leap into the 21st century. Unlike the Milwaukee-Eight, this engine truly was new. Liquid-cooled, higher revving, packed with modern performance features. When it debuted in the Pan America Adventure Bike and later in the Sportster S and Nightster, critics were surprised. Harley had finally built an engine that could compete head-to-head with European and Japanese rivals. For once, Harley could point to a machine that was genuinely modern. But that success carried a devastating side effect. The Revolution Max did not sound like a Harley, it did not ride like a Harley. For many loyalists, it did not even feel like a Harley. The very thing that made it competitive was also what stripped it of the brand's identity. Traditionalists looked at the Pan America and muttered that Harley had sold out, while younger riders still saw Harley as an aging brand awkwardly trying to catch up. Sales reflected this divide. The Pan America briefly topped adventure bike charts, but it did not build lasting momentum. The Sportster S and Nightster gained attention for performance, but they struggled to define their place in Harley's lineup. Were they meant to lure younger riders away from Yamaha? Were they supposed to convert Ducati fans? Or were they an admission that the old V-twin could no longer anchor Harley's future? The Revolution Max Gamble proved Harley's dilemma in the starkest terms. If it modernized, it alienated its base. If it refused, it fell behind. Either way, the identity crisis deepened, but the betrayal was not just mechanical, it was human. Abandoned on the factory floor. For decades, Harley Davidson sold itself as the most American of brands, built by American workers representing American pride. Yet in city after city, factory closures told a different story. Plants in Missouri, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania saw layoffs ripple through communities. Workers who had assembled the very engines that made Harley famous suddenly found themselves without jobs, victims of cost-cutting measures and global supply chain shifts. Unions cried betrayal. Generations of Harley workers had accepted modest wages and long hours because they believed in what they were building. They believed they were part of something bigger than a paycheck. They were the guardians of a cultural icon. When Harley chose to offshore parts, reduce American labor, and squeeze costs at the expense of communities, that belief cracked. Pride gave way to anger, and loyalty gave way to bitterness. The emotional fallout was severe. Entire towns that once thrived on Harley production now faced unemployment and shrinking tax bases. The same company that draped itself in stars and stripes had, in the eyes of many, abandoned the very workers who gave it meaning. Workers felt they had built Harley's myth, only to be discarded when the company needed to please shareholders. This was more than a labor dispute, it was an existential wound. If Harley was no longer built by us, then who was it for? And just when workers thought they had hit rock bottom, politics entered the fight. Tariffs and trade wars. When President Donald Trump announced tariffs on imported steel and aluminum in 2018, Harley Davidson was supposed to be one of the beneficiaries. Protecting American manufacturing was framed as a way to safeguard iconic companies like Harley, ensuring they could compete on fairer terms. Trump himself repeatedly invoked Harley as a symbol of American resilience. But Harley had other plans. Instead of expanding American production, the company announced it would shift more manufacturing overseas to avoid retaliatory tariffs in Europe. To critics, this was nothing short of betrayal. The brand that marketed itself as all-American was moving jobs abroad while enjoying political cover at home. Workers raged, unions protested, and Trump himself publicly attacked Harley, accusing it of selling out American values. The optics were devastating. Harley was now caught between both political parties, distrusted by labor and mocked by consumers who saw hypocrisy at every turn. What was once the motorcycle of American pride had become a pawn in trade wars, a company whose leadership seemed more concerned with navigating global costs than defending its workers or its traditions. The tariffs exposed the truth. Harley was not protected by politics. It was cornered by them. Each move to survive only deepened the perception that the company was running from its roots. But Harley's real enemy was not politicians, it was the next generation of riders. The generation that walked away. For millennials and Gen Z, Harley Davidson's V-twin does not hold the same magic it once did. Where baby boomers saw rebellion and freedom, younger riders see weight, expense, and a brand that feels like a museum exhibit. To them, a Harley is not a dream. It is a dad's garage project. Nostalgia does not sell to a generation shaped by rising costs, digital technology, and constant change. Instead of thunderous chrome cruisers, they are drawn to lighter, sharper, more versatile machines. The financial barrier is real. Entry-level Harleys often stretch well beyond $8,000 or $9,000 before fees and insurance. For younger adults juggling student loans, high rent, and uncertain job markets, the price tag is suffocating. Meanwhile, competitors like Royal Enfield offer attractive, modern-looking bikes for nearly half that cost. The comparison is brutal. Why commit to years of debt for a cruiser that feels outdated when a rider can get more features for less elsewhere? Culturally, Harley feels even further behind. Social media has reshaped what motorcycles mean. On TikTok and Instagram, sleek Yamahas pull wheelies, Ducatis scream through corners, and BMWs conquer mountains. Harleys, with their bulk and chrome, do not spark that same shareable energy. For Gen Z, the V-twin soundtrack is not freedom. It is background noise from an older era. This generational rejection strikes at Harley's core identity. For decades, the company counted on each new wave of riders aspiring to join its world. But this wave has walked away, and with it, Harley's future customer base. And if Harley lost the young, it also lost the rebels. The new rebels. Rebellion did not disappear, it simply changed hands. Where Harley once owned the image of the outsider, rivals now wear that crown proudly. Royal Enfield, once mocked as outdated, has transformed itself into a global phenomenon. Its retro-styled motorcycles, affordable and approachable, appeal to first-time riders who want authenticity without the baggage. A Royal Enfield owner still feels distinct on the road, but the price is closer to $5,000 or $6,000, not double digits. Then come the Chinese disruptors. Brands like CF Moto and Benelli, long dismissed as budget knockoffs, have stepped into a new role. The providers of value-packed, stylish machines for a younger audience. Their bikes boast full-color TFT displays, modern ride modes, and sharp Street Fighter looks. Features Harley struggles to provide even on models twice the cost. Suddenly choosing a non-traditional brand is not just acceptable, it is a statement of independence. This is what Harley once symbolized. To ride one was to stand apart, to embrace a rebellious streak. But in 2025, choosing Harley feels more like conformity, while opting for an Enfield or a CF Moto feels genuinely disruptive. The outsiders Harley once mocked are now defining cool for the next generation. The result is clear. Harley has been dethroned in the very category it created. Rivals now own the rebel spirit, leaving Harley branded not as the outcast, but as the establishment. However, Harley's biggest competition was not rivals, it was itself. The used bike flood. Perhaps the most painful blow to Harley's sales comes not from competitors, but from Harley's own shadow. Decades of production have filled the secondhand market with an ocean of V-twins. Riders in search of a Harley often skip the showroom entirely, heading instead to classified ads, auction sites, or local dealerships where used models sit at a fraction of new bike prices. For a potential buyer, the logic is simple. A brand new Harley can easily cross $15,000 or $20,000 once fees and taxes are added. But scroll online for 10 minutes and a lightly used, low-mileage Harley appears for half that. In many cases, these bikes have barely been ridden, abandoned by owners who bought the dream and parked it after a season. With so many used machines available, new sales stall. This surplus has destroyed one of Harley's long-standing advantages: resale value. For decades, owners justified paying a premium by pointing to Harley's strength in the second-hand market. That confidence is gone. Harleys now depreciate quickly, which discourages new purchases and accelerates the shift toward used inventory. Dealers themselves quietly admit that moving a pre-owned Harley is often easier than selling a new one. Worse, this glut reshapes the brand's image. What was once aspirational now feels disposable. Harleys no longer look rare or precious. They look common, collecting dust in garages across the country. When abundance replaces scarcity, status collapses. And once the resale value is gone, the status symbol crumbles next. The death of status. Owning a Harley Davidson was once shorthand for success. It meant you had money to spare, confidence to display, and the desire to own something iconic. The bike was a trophy as much as it was transportation. Yet in the modern market, that status has evaporated. Instead of signaling prestige, a Harley now suggests poor value. What was once a reward is increasingly seen as a financial mistake. The erosion is clearest among affluent buyers. Professionals who once dreamed of rolling into their driveway on a gleaming Harley now look elsewhere. Adventure bikes from BMW and Triumph dominate the high-end touring segment, offering comfort and cutting-edge technology. Ducati and KTM seduce the wealthy with performance and style. For those with disposable income, Harley no longer sits at the top of the wish list. In fact, in many circles, it does not appear on the list at all. Cultural values have shifted too. In an era of climate awareness and sleek digital identity, a heavy air-cooled cruiser feels clumsy and out of step. Where Tesla owners flaunt green innovation, Harley riders are increasingly viewed as clinging to the past. That shift makes the V-twin not a status symbol, but a symbol of resistance to change. This collapse is not just a marketing problem, it is a generational fracture. Harley has lost both ends of the spectrum. Younger riders see it as irrelevant, while older aspirational buyers see it as outdated. The middle ground has vanished, leaving Harley stranded. The riders who feel betrayed. For the men and women who spent their lives riding Harleys, the decline was more than a corporate misstep. It was personal. These were not just customers, they were believers who built their identities around the brand. Motorcycle clubs that once marched proudly under the Harley flag began to fracture. Longtime riders who had defended the V-twin for decades whispered doubts in garages and forums. Loyalty that once felt unshakable started to slip away. The betrayal was layered. First came the feeling of abandonment when factories closed and American jobs vanished. Then came the sense of being ignored, as Harley pushed sleek new designs that felt like strangers to the faithful. Add the sting of rising prices, and many riders felt that Harley no longer cared about the community that sustained it. To them, the brand had become corporate, cold, unrecognizable, and uninterested in loyalty unless it came with a large check. The emotional fallout was visible at rallies and shows. Where Harley once dominated, other brands now shared the spotlight. It was not just a loss of sales, it was a loss of trust. And when a brand loses trust from its most devoted believers, it is far harder to regain than a single missed quarter. And that disillusionment quickly became political ammunition. The political football. Few companies in America embody national identity like Harley Davidson. That made its struggles irresistible to politicians who turned the brand into a symbol in their larger battles. During Donald Trump's presidency, Harley became the centerpiece of his tariff war rhetoric, cited as proof that protecting American steel and aluminum would save iconic industries. But when Harley responded by shifting production overseas, Trump lashed out, calling the company disloyal and un-American. Democrats seized on the moment too. For labor unions, Harley's layoffs became a rallying cry about corporate greed and broken promises to workers. For climate activists, Harley represented everything outdated about American industry, resistant to change, tied to fossil fuels, and unwilling to lead in electrification. Harley's once proud logo found itself weaponized in speeches about everything from globalization to climate change. The irony was stark. Harley, which had built its brand on avoiding politics and selling freedom, became a political football kicked around by both parties. To some, it represented betrayal of workers. To others, resistance to environmental progress. No matter the angle, Harley was no longer a unifying symbol. It was a contested one. The louder the political arguments grew, the more it distracted from Harley's actual motorcycles. Buyers did not want to be dragged into trade wars or climate debates when choosing a bike. Yet for many, walking into a Harley dealership felt like stepping into the middle of an identity crisis bigger than two wheels. But while America argued about Harley's soul, the rest of the world moved on. And if you don't want to miss the rest of this series, because trust me, it only gets deeper, make sure you hit subscribe right now. The Global Shift. While Harley fought to save its fading V-twin and battled political storms at home, the motorcycle world quietly transformed. European and Japanese manufacturers pushed forward with modular designs, liquid-cooled twins, and tech-heavy adventure bikes that captured imaginations globally. At the same time, smaller Asian manufacturers seized the entry-level market with stylish, affordable machines. And above it all loomed the next great frontier: electrification. Honda and Yamaha invested heavily in hybrid and electric platforms. Startups from China and India unveiled fully electric motorcycles that promised instant torque, low maintenance, and urban-friendly mobility. Even niche European companies launched futuristic prototypes that made Harley's lineup feel like a time capsule. Consumers in global markets, particularly in Asia, looked at motorcycles not as luxury toys but as essential transportation. For them, Harley's heavy cruisers were irrelevant, a mismatch for their needs and their wallets. Harley had opportunities to lead but hesitated. Electric concepts were teased but never launched on time. Global expansion was promised but fell flat against cheaper, more adaptable competitors. The world kept shifting, and Harley seemed stuck, trapped between heritage and innovation with no clear path forward. The result is sobering. Harley's V-twin, once the heartbeat of global rebellion, now marks the end of an era. As electrification accelerates and modular platforms dominate, Harley risks becoming a relic, remembered for what it was rather than what it built next. So now you know the truth about Harley's V-twin and what it really means for riders like us. But I want to know what you think. Was Harley betrayed by tradition or by its own decisions? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this.